Welcome back to the Midday Reset. My name is Antoinette, and today I want to talk to you about suicide. I've avoided this topic like the plague since I started this podcast, knowing full well that it would need to be addressed one day. Since this show deals a lot with the lessons I've learned from battling anxiety and depression, I knew I'd have to include it because my mental health journey has included thoughts of suicide previously. And those of you who have met me in person know that I have a semicolon tattoo on my right arm as a symbol of my triumph over these afflictions. I no longer have suicidal ideation. I do not run from my depression and anxiety, but instead I use tools that I've learned and created for myself for coping with them when they arise. And those instances almost always include some sort of turbulence. But the turbulence doesn't last long. And one of the reasons that I created this podcast was to create something that could exist for people who feel alone, feel stuck, just need to know that they can relate to someone else out there who has also faced struggle. And struggle doesn't just stop because you reach a certain number of followers or you make a certain dollar amount each month. Mark Manson talks about this in his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F. Problems never really go away for anyone. They just become better problems. But suicide is a problem that affects all races, all classes, all ages. I pulled some statistics from the National Institute of Mental Health where they cautioned in 2017 that suicide was the 10th leading cause of death overall in the United States, claiming the lives of over 47,000 people. Suicide was the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 and 34, and the fourth leading cause among individuals between the ages of 35 and 54. There were more than twice as many suicides, 47,173, in the United States as there were homicides, which in 2017, that number was 19,510. So, because this affects all of us in a sense, I think that we can all benefit from changing the way that we talk about suicide. For starters, I would love to see us move away from the idea that anyone who commits suicide is a coward or cowardly. I mean, maybe to the people left behind in the wake after that happens, it seems like that person took off and left them with a mess. But that's also a selfish way of thinking about it, in my opinion. To end your life means you had to suffer through some kind of pain, whether that was mental anguish or the physical pain involved with an act like that. Either way, the person who is gone was hurting. And I think that looking at the pain of someone else and deciding how that impacts us first and foremost is prioritizing the wrong thing. I think people who seek suicide are doing so because they do not want to burden those that they love and care about any longer. I remember having those feelings when I was suicidal just after the birth of my first child. That's not to say there isn't pain left after the person is gone. I've known 3 people who have died this way, one of whom was my sorority sister, another one was a coworker, and each one hurt. But any pain or frustration I felt in those moments seemed secondary to the pain or frustration that person must have felt, likely long before they ever decided to act on it. And that's the other thing about suicides, too. We don't really get to ask a lot of questions after the person is gone. I mean, we can ask, but the person in the best position to answer all of our questions isn't around anymore. They're the ones with the real answers. The most we can do is piece together information based on the clues that are left behind. Sometimes there's a note. I've never known someone who died by suicide and left a note, but for those who have discovered notes after their loved one has passed, I would imagine that that can serve as some semblance of closure if the note contains the answers that you're looking for. It's often a common response to want to deny details if they don't line up with the narrative that we've been subscribed to. When a person seems warm and bubbly and happy, but then suddenly is gone like that, we question how that could have been. Robin Williams, for example, made so many people laugh and smile and think. None of us knew there was so much happening behind all of it. And many of us wanted to reject that someone we associated with so much happiness could be so tormented. But that was the truth that we all had to arrive at after learning of his death. The last bit I want to mention before wrapping this up is that suicide is something that can be prevented, I believe, but none of us is responsible for keeping someone else from committing suicide. And what I mean by that is when someone is determined to take their own life, they will stay determined no matter how many times you show up with cupcakes or flowers or take them out for drinks or send them texts or call. While those gestures are beautiful and not at all a waste, they don't often stop the act from happening when a person is determined. I had serious suicide ideation, but I never reached the stage of determination where I'd chosen a method and a means. People who have gone this far are often hard to stop. I'm not saying it's impossible, and no, I am not a doctor. But in my experience, those are the ones who usually will have people fooled because of their disposition. They might lighten up and they might seem to be coming around when lo and behold, that person is simply coasting until another setback happens, and setbacks happen to us all. And when they fall backwards into the spiral, suddenly the suicide option becomes very convenient because they have a method chosen and really they just have to commit to it. It's a matter of scheduling it, so to speak. And when the story comes out, it's often that this person had been doing well for a bit, and so their friends and family really didn't suspect that anything was wrong, which leaves them even more shocked when it does happen. I think we can at least back off of the idea of suicide being selfish and things that only self absorbed people do. Instead, I think it's a form of sacrifice, a very permanent one. And most of the problems that we have in this life are temporary, and that's exactly why it's not the best solution for a lot of what we face. So, I know this was heavy, but if you have thoughts, you can reach out to me at Antoinette@middayreset.com. That's ANTOINETTE at middayreset.com. Yes, I have a new email address. You can also hit me up on Instagram. I have two accounts at Miss Antoinette Chanel. Chanel is CHANEL. If you want to follow my professional journey, my author account, that's what that one's all about. And then you can also follow the Instagram account for the Midday Reset, which is at the Midday Reset. And that's basically where I show all that I'm doing to stay calm and peaceful in a world that is constantly trying to rev up my anxiety. I'll be sharing what books I'm reading and who I'm connecting with in the community for helpful resources, as well as tips, and sharing that information with you, all of my lovely listeners. So stay tuned and take care. One other thing that I forgot to mention that I want to make sure that I include in this episode is that if you are somebody who is suffering from suicidal thoughts or even wanting to attempt because you have figured out your method, or you know somebody who is at risk in that way, then the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is helpful. It is available. There are also other community resources, but this is the biggest one that I know of. And so I wanted to make sure that I shared it again just in case you had forgotten about it. But their telephone number is 1-800-273-8255. Again, 800-273-8255. And their website is suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Take care, my friends. I'll talk to you soon.